Hello, beautiful ladies. I'm going to start by giving you a little bit of backstory about my personal development journey before my current era of studying feminine energy. So I've always journaled a lot, and during the pandemic, with the extra free time that I had, I spent a lot more time consuming general productivity content on YouTube, and also very specifically bullet journaling. And some people, as part of bullet journaling, they'll do habit tracking, and I did many months of habit tracking. One of the things I tried to figure out, was if I could figure out a pattern of my feelings based off of the part of my menstrual cycle I was in. And I couldn't do it. And this was at the same time that I was reading the book The Body Keeps the Score. And so I should have been cognizant that I might have difficulty understanding my feelings, being aware of my feelings, being able to measure them and seeing patterns in them. But all the same, I couldn't figure it out. I tried to track it. I couldn't see any pattern. But at the same time, I think I had more of what the general society's idea of what the menstrual cycle is, which is that there is PMS, which is when someone pathologically feels a whole lot different right before their period. And then the normal state of health is to not feel that much different before your period, which is what I thought I was. I was not ever aware of feeling very different either right before my period or during my period. But again, that's to be expected because I'm someone with a history of trauma where my body is going into fight or flight because I feel scared in situations where it's not appropriate to feel scared. And so I'm used to having to ignore how my body feels because I know that what my body is telling me doesn't make any sense and I just need to ignore it. And I bet that for autistic people who don't have a history of trauma, that they will still have a pattern of doing that, because there's always going to be situations where you're freaking out because there's some change in plans, but you don't want to look weird. So you're trying to make yourself look like you're not freaking out as bad, that the plans changed. And so with a history of that, one might get into the habit of being less and less aware of how they feel in their body. I found out about cycle syncing when I started learning about feminine energy, because not every feminine energy teacher talks about cycle syncing, but some of them do. And I found it immensely helpful. As someone who was not innately on my own able to understand my own patterns in my cycle, it was really helpful to learn the general pattern of how one feels differently throughout their cycle. And once I knew the general pattern, I was then able to see it in myself. For as long as I can remember, as long as I was not in school and seeing my friends every day, ever since not being in school and it being my job as an adult to call up my friends to make sure we're hanging out, I have had a pattern of, I want to call up my friends, I want to keep up with them. I'm trying for weeks and months to try to get myself to pick up the phone to call up all my friends. And then suddenly one day I'm able to. I call up all my friends in one day. I hang out with them one by one every single day for like a week. And then I feel satisfied socially and I don't call them for a while. And then it turns into, it's time for me to call my friends again, but I just can't get myself to do it. And as an autistic person, I know that one is supposed to talk to their friends a lot, I think. Also as someone who has had some poor success in friendship and has wanted to have the sort of friends that want to hang out with me all the time, like it seems like lots of other people do. But I didn't recognize it as possibly being something that was normal. So in the menstrual cycle, you have your follicular and your ovulatory phase, and those are the times of the month in which you are naturally more social. And then you have the luteal and the menstrual phases, which are naturally the times of the month that you're less social. You're supposed to fluctuate with how much you want to socialize. I didn't know that. And in my year-long stint of being pretty thick into consuming productivity content on YouTube, I didn't understand that what they were promoting was a very masculine idea of productivity. The masculine idea of productivity is to be able to do the same amount every single day. So with habit tracking, for example, you try to do the same thing every day and you're tracking it to make sure you're doing the same thing every day. But that's not how it's going to work with the menstrual cycle. And I found with habit tracking that I could get myself to do all my good habits every day for like 2 or 3 weeks. And then I'd slip up for a while. And then I could do it again for 2 or 3 weeks straight. And then I'd slip up for a while. Which I don't think lined up with my menstrual cycle, but if it did, it would make sense. So since learning about cycle syncing, now instead of feeling like I need to hang out with my friends the same amount all the time, I now, at least when I'm menstruating, I'm not currently menstruating, I'm pregnant right now. At least when I'm menstruating, I will try to line up all of my times hanging out with friends during the follicular phase and then let myself have a break after that. This gets to be a little hard because, of course, one needs to make plans with friends before it's time to hang out with friends. So this will mean that during my menstrual part of the cycle, I might push myself a little bit to, have phone calls that are just long enough to make plans with my friends. And then I have the plans ready to go during the follicular phase. It's also really interesting to learn that when we're interested in hanging out with friends is not going to be the same time that it's appropriate to make plans to hang out with friends. Like I just said, unless you have the sort of friends that will hang out with you same day, which excuse me, which I don't. You have to plan a few days in advance. So when I was younger, excuse me. When I was younger, I had the habit of being really excited to go to a party. And then a week would pass and it'd be time for the party. And then I just could not convince myself to go. And I noticed this most often in the wintertime when it was dark, that I had a really hard time getting myself to leave the house after it was dark. And that's interesting because otherwise I haven't really noticed in myself. Excuse me again. Otherwise, I haven't noticed in myself a pattern of feeling more sad when the sun goes away for the year, which is pretty common in Seattle. It's called seasonal affective disorder. But it also makes sense that when you're excited to go to a party and you say you're going to go and you're so looking forward to it, it would make sense if that happened during my follicular phase, and then a week later I'm in my luteal phase and it's no longer time for me to be as social, and so I'm less inclined to want to go to the party. I don't have a record of both my cycle and when parties happened relative to the time of the month for that time in my life. So I'll never know if it lined up with that. But all the same, it seems like there was a pattern of perhaps the sun helping me get past what was hard for me to do hormonally when I would want to go to a party and then a week later not really be able to make myself do it. Here's another thing that's really interesting about cycle syncing. So I do have an ADHD diagnosis, although I don't think of myself as having ADHD day to day because I don't find it helpful to me. I mostly think about myself as being autistic because I find that as a lot more helpful for me. But during the follicular phase is when you're most energetic, and it's also when you're most creative, which is when you have the most divergent thoughts. And so as someone who can have trouble focusing anyways, when I was most energetic, it was the time in which I'd most likely just be walking in circles around the house for hours, having just the most amazing thoughts, discovering so many things in my head. And then in the luteal menstrual phases, I would no longer have the energy to do things, but as part of being more tired, it ended up that I would actually have better focus with doing things, even though I was less tired and less able to do things. So that's helpful for me to know, because when I'm in the follicular phase, that's the time for me to tell myself over and over again, okay, I need to stop my train of thought and go do something with my body and use this energy I have. It's really helpful to know when it's most advantageous for me to push myself to focus more, because otherwise is not as nice to just every single day just try to have to focus better. And then of course in the luteal phase is when I'm naturally less social, and that's the time that I seem more autistic. So that's really interesting to me that during the follicular phase I'm acting more ADHD. And during the follicular phase, during the follicular phase is when I'm acting the most ADHD, and during the luteal phase is when I'm acting the most autistic. And it'd be really nice if this information were more well known, because for people who menstruate, it'd be really nice to know the pattern that we have in ourselves, instead of just seeing that sometimes we act really ADHD and sometimes we act really autistic, and not being able to follow a pattern and not being able to design our lives around it. I think if this information were more widespread, we could be more intentional about when in the month we need to push ourselves to focus more, and when in the month we need to push ourselves to socialize more. And that would just help us all out, and we'd get more of what we wanted to accomplished. It'd be really great. I hope this information was really helpful to you. Please subscribe, and I would love to tell you more in the next one. Bye.